that deserter's name was read out on 3 successive parades as a warning.
The overwhelming majority of these executions took place on the Western Front. More than 3/4 were for desertion. The next most frequent crime was murder.
Firing party. Fire!
Despite every depressing circumstance, the discipline of the soldiers of the British Empire did not break down. But every last shred of humor and optimism was needed to maintain it. Yet, the Western Front had its compensations. The war years, said one British soldier who served there, will stand out in the memories of vast numbers of those who fought as the happiest period of their lives. He went on,
in spite of all differences in rank, we were comrades, brothers, dwelling together in amity. We were privileged to see in each other that inner, ennobled self, which in the grim commercial struggle of peacetime is all too frequently atrophied for lack of expression. We could note the intense affection of soldiers for certain officers, their absolute trust in them. We saw the love, passing the love of women, of one pal for his half-section. We were privileged, in short, to see a reign of goodwill among men, which the piping times of peace, with all their organized charity, their free meals, free hospitals, and Sunday sermons, have never equaled. Otherwise, we could not have stuck it.
the code of frontline behavior became the only one worth having. Hateful, disgusting, terrifying, the zone of the armies was nevertheless the only place to be.
For my part, I am more glad of that experience than of anything else I've known.
The ultimate test of optimism by now was the front itself. Was it hopeless? Was it insane to expect a decision on this static, immovable battlefield? The argument had lasted right through the war. It reached the extremes of bitterness in 1917. On the one hand were those who believed, and constantly repeated, that the Western Front was a hopeless arena. Their chief spokesman was Britain's Prime Minister, David Lloyd George.
The Allied strategy in France had been a sanguinary mistake which nearly brought us to irretrievable defeat. The Allied generals were completely baffled by the decision of the Germans to dig in. In their hopeless effort to break through, they could think of nothing better than the sacrifice of millions of men.
By 1917, Lloyd George's detestation of the Western Front was adamant, and he expressed it freely.
He said that he was not prepared to accept the position of a butcher's boy driving cattle to the slaughter, and that he would not do it.
To the British generals, the front had a different significance. The Chief of Imperial General Staff, Sir William Robertson, said,
In the Great War, the decisive front was fixed for us by the deployment of the enemy's masses in France and Belgium.
Britain's allies endured mixed fortunes as 1917 drew to an end. The October Revolution threw Russia out of the war, robbing the alliance of her limitless manpower. And the United States of America, after 8 months of war, could only place 4 divisions in France, only 1 in the line. Italy sustained a loss of over 300,000 men in 3 weeks at Caporetto. British and French divisions had to be rushed to her aid. The one satisfactory feature was the revival of France. Carefully nursed by its commander-in-chief, General Pétain, the French army slowly recovered its courage and dash. The French nation, too, found new spirit, embodied as so often in one man. On November the 15th, Monsieur Georges Clemenceau became Premier of France. He was 76 years old, a radical of the sternest breed, called the Tiger. Winston Churchill wrote,
As much as any single human being can ever be a nation, he was France.
When Clemenceau addressed the French Chamber of Deputies for the first time as war premier, he told them,
We stand here before you with but one thought, to pursue the war relentlessly. No more pacifist campaigns, no treachery, no semi-treachery, only war. Nothing but war.
Clemenceau believed firmly in the Western Front, where the deadlock now seemed complete. In a sense, the deadlock was the war. The evil of the Western Front was its immobility. The immobility was created by the deadlock. The deadlock was the even balance of trenches, barbed wire, and machine guns against the artillery, which alone could destroy them, but in doing so turned the ground into a wilderness of craters and made impossible the very movement it was intended to produce. Now it was November. Haig planned a final stroke on the front of the British Third Army under General Sir Julian Byng. Here, opposite Cambrai, the ground was firm. Grass grew across a no-man's land which was reasonably level. No shattering bombardments had torn this up and turned it into a bog. This was tank country. November the 19th, General Ellis, commanding the Tank Corps, issued a special order.
Tomorrow, the Tank Corps will have the chance for which it has been waiting for many months, to operate on good going in the van of the battle. I leave the good name of the Corps with great confidence in your hands. I propose leading the attack of the Center Division.
The objective which they were attacking was the Hindenburg Line.
There were 3 lines of trenches, each trench anything up to 15 feet wide. In front of the main line lay band upon band and acre upon acre of dense wire. Nowhere was it less than 50 yards deep, and here and there it jutted out in great salients flanked by batteries of machine guns. Never before had we been faced with such a wilderness of wire.
At 6:20 a.m. on November the 20th, with their general flying his flag at their head like an admiral at sea in the tank Hilda, the machines of a new epoch rolled into battle. 476 tanks, over 50 supply tanks, 32 specially for destroying wire, 2 for bridging, 9 wireless tanks, 1 for laying cable, 378 fighting tanks.
We got in, shut down our tanks, and away we went. We had rough compasses in the tanks, and we got our course, and we set course for the enemy line. The first thing that happened, it was all dead silent. There wasn't a word until we got to the enemy wire, which was 0 hour for the guns. And that, again, was a first-class show. The Crystal Palace had nothing in it at all. It was no answer from the Germans at all, and it was the first time in our lives we saw the Hun being blown up all over the place, bits of thing going everywhere. The troops were frightfully pleased. No machine gun fires. We opened up our tanks, and then we got into this belt of wire. It was quite terrifying because it was about 7 feet high, very, very thick wire, and it was over 120 yards deep in places. And of course, if we'd have stopped in that or got our tracks ripped off, then we should have been for it. Instead of that, the tanks made great swathes in the wire, and the Jocks who were playing with us, they came through the gaps we'd made, and we all emerged the other side into a deep valley known as the Grand Ravine.
I crossed the first line. The wire didn't prove to be any obstacle at all. The artillery had done their job very well. And the element of surprise, the heavy gas shelling, no preliminary bombardments at all, had made it almost a cakewalk, one might say.
Almost a cakewalk. In 4 hours, the British Third Army advanced between 3 and 4 miles, right through the Hindenburg defenses, took well over 4,000 prisoners and over 100 guns. Their own losses were astonishingly light. It was one of the most remarkable victories of the war. And in November 1917, victory of any kind was badly needed. The British government decided that the time had come to ring the church bells of Britain.
It's the first time the peals have been rung since the outbreak of war. I went up Ludgate Hill to hear St. Paul's carillon. It hasn't been heard since it celebrated the declaration of peace after the South African War. There was a big crowd on the cathedral steps and in the forecourt. After the clock had struck 12, the big bell known as Great Paul first boomed out and was followed by the full peal of bells. The people cheered and cheered. The bells of the other churches helped to swell the wings of sound carrying the joyful news.
One of Haig's staff officers wrote on November the 23rd,
All at home seemed to have gone crazy about the last success. It was, of course, a very fine effort, but it was no greater than other shows and does not deserve hysterics. When the really big, decisive victory comes, it will be time enough to ring church bells and sing the national anthem.
The doubters were right. On November the 30th, the Germans counterattacked, taking most of the British troops by surprise. In the fight which followed, they won back almost all the ground that they had lost. When the battle died down, losses on both sides were roughly equal. It was a sad end for the British Army, which had put forth such tremendous efforts during the year. The iron of disappointment entered deep into men's souls. A British diplomat wrote to Haig,
Even now, this war could have a glorious ending for us, but it won't.
Christmas came, and an officer at Haig's headquarters wrote in his diary,
The fourth Christmas at war. And though the outlook is so black, yet still I think it will be the last war Christmas. How different each Christmas has been. We cannot fail to win. Each year inevitably shows success more certain. But for the next few months, the prospect is the most gloomy since 1914.
"1917 expired, having brought nothing but frustration to the Allied cause. The Western Front remained, baffling, bloody, ruinous, and still the very heart of the war. All that men could look forward to was Clemenceau's promise. Only war, nothing but war.